On June 4th, 1942, the Pacific War reached a turning point that would reshape the course of World War II. In the pre-dawn hours, Commander Minoru Genda stood on the bridge of the carrier Akagi, overlooking the most powerful fleet Japan had ever assembled. For carriers, 11 battleships, and over 200 ships steamed confidently toward Midway Atoll, their mission: destroy what remained of American naval power in the Pacific. For 6 months, the Imperial Japanese Navy had known nothing but victory. From Pearl Harbor to Singapore, they had shattered Allied forces and built a vast empire stretching 20 million square miles. Now they believed they would crush the last resistance. What Japan didn't know was that their plans had already been compromised. American codebreakers at Station Hypo, under Commander Joseph Rockefort, had cracked JN-25B, Japan's naval code. When intercepted communications repeatedly referenced a target called F, the Americans suspected it was Midway. A fake message about a water shortage at Midway confirmed it. 2 days later, Japanese intelligence reported that AF was low on fresh water, proof that Midway was indeed the target. Armed with this insight, Admiral Chester Nimitz positioned his 3 available carriers, Enterprise, Hornet, and the hastily repaired Yorktown, northeast of Midway, hidden in a gap in Japan's search pattern. They would be waiting in exactly the right spot. Japan believed the Yorktown was out of action for months after the Battle of Coral Sea, but U.S. repair crews worked around the clock, restoring the ship in just 72 hours. As the Japanese prepared their strike on Midway, they were unaware that 233 American planes were already loaded, fueled, and waiting on 3 carriers that weren't supposed to be there. Complete radio silence had not protected them. American intelligence had been reading their mail for weeks. The Japanese operated on a series of dangerous assumptions: that U.S. carriers were elsewhere, that American pilots were inexperienced, that their torpedoes were ineffective, and most critically, that Japan's plan remained a secret. Every one of those assumptions would collapse within hours. At 0430, Admiral Nagumo launched the first wave against Midway, 108 aircraft that struck the island but failed to destroy its airfield. At 0715, believing there was no American fleet nearby, Nagumo ordered his reserve planes rearmed for a second land attack. Below deck, bombs and torpedoes were being shifted hurriedly. Then came a delayed message. A search plane reported a sighting 10 unidentified ships. They might be the enemy carriers, but there was no confirmation. At 0745, Nagumo demanded details. The response wouldn't arrive for 30 precious minutes. By the time he learned the truth, it was too late. Between 0920 and 1020, waves of American torpedo bombers from all 3 carriers attacked the Japanese fleet. They were obsolete, slow, and vulnerable. The results were devastating. Torpedo Squadron 8 from the Hornet lost 14 of 15 planes. Squadron 6 from the Enterprise lost 10 of 14. Squadron 3 from the Yorktown lost 10 of 12. Not a single torpedo struck a target. From the water, Ensign George Gay, the sole survivor Torpedo 8, watched the squadron be annihilated. But these seemingly futile attacks accomplished the critical task of pulling all Japanese fighter cover down to sea level, leaving the skies above wide open. At 10:20, dive bombers from the Enterprise and Yorktown arrived. They had flown beyond their planned intercept points and, using intuition, followed the wake of a Japanese destroyer rushing to rejoin the fleet. They found the Japanese carriers vulnerable, with flight decks crowded and fueled aircraft being readied for launch. Within minutes, 3 of Japan's 4 fleet carriers, Akagi, Kaga, and Soryu, were hit with precision. Bombs ignited ordnance stacked on the hangar decks, causing massive explosions. Fires raged uncontrollably. In 6 minutes, the course of the war shifted permanently. Only the Hiryu remained operational. She launched 2 strikes that inflicted heavy damage on the Yorktown, leaving her dead in the water. But American dive bombers found Imperial later that afternoon and scored fatal hits. She burned into the night and was scuttled the next morning. In just one day, Japan lost 4 fleet carriers and over 3,000 sailors and aircrew, including more than 100 elite pilots who had taken years to train. America lost 1 carrier, 1 destroyer, 150 aircraft, and 307 personnel. The damage to Japan's naval air power was irreparable. The victory at Midway was not just tactical, it was strategic and psychological. Japan's aura of invincibility was shattered. More critically, they lost experienced aviators they could not replace. Pre-war pilot training had taken years. After Midway, Japan rushed pilots into service with just a fraction of the flight hours. Meanwhile, the U.S. was training 2,500 pilots a month with far more experience before combat. The industrial gap was staggering. From 1942 to 1945, Japan produced 12 carriers. The U.S. produced 141. Japan built 65,000 aircraft. The U.S. built nearly 300,000. It was not a contest Japan could win. Midway also exposed serious flaws in Japanese doctrine, carrier design, and decision-making. Enclosed hangars trapped explosions. Damage control was poorly trained and under-equipped. There was no effective system for rescuing downed pilots. Japanese search patterns were inadequate. Only 7 planes were used instead of the doctrinal 22. The delay from the Tone Scout plane directly contributed to Nagumo's inability to respond in time. Japanese communications lacked flexibility. While the Americans used shipboard radar and radio to coordinate, Japan relied on flags and lights. Post-war interrogations confirmed the impact. Japanese officers admitted that after Midway, they were never on the offensive again. Every campaign, from Guadalcanal to the Philippine Sea, was shaped by the carriers lost on June 4th. The loss of trained aircrew led to a decline in combat performance that became irreversible. By the 1944 Battle of the Philippine Sea, Japan's pilots averaged 200 hours of flight time. American pilots had over 600. The result was the infamous Great Marianas Turkey Shoot, where Japan lost nearly 500 aircraft in a single day. The Battle of Midway was not won through brute strength. It was won through intelligence, preparation, and the ability to adapt. The Americans didn't need to outnumber their enemy. They needed to outthink them. Station Hypo provided precise information about Japan's objectives, routes, and timelines. This allowed Nimitz to set a trap, conserve resources, and achieve tactical surprise despite being outgunned. The Japanese had the bigger fleet, but the Americans had the better information, and that made all the difference. In the final analysis, Midway marked the beginning of the end for Japan's naval supremacy. It demonstrated that modern warfare was no longer just about courage or tactics. It was about intelligence, industry, and the capacity to learn. The Japanese Navy that sailed confidently toward Midway on June 4th was the most powerful carrier force ever assembled. By sunset, it was shattered. And though the war would rage for 3 more years, Japan's hopes of victory died with those 4 carriers northwest of Midway. In 6 minutes of precision bombing, the future defeated the past, and the balance of power in the Pacific was changed forever.